This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode number 107. We are going to be talking all about Hyperdev. I am your host this week, Danny Blue, and with me, as always, is Justin Ribeiro.
Hello, wonderful people.
And Leon Rebel.
Hi, everyone.
So, like I said, today we're going to be talking all about Hyperdev, and we have two very special desks. Two very special guests from the
Solid start, Danny. Solid start.
I feel good. I feel good about this. It can only go up from here. Two very special guests from the Hyperdev team. We have Daniel and Perjan. So if you guys could just real quick give us a quick background about yourselves, who you are, what you do, what you like. Starting with Daniel.
Hello, I'm Daniel Exmore. I'm the team lead on Hyperdev, and my desk is very special because it's like a standing desk. It's going up right now.
That's fancy. See, no, it was relevant. It was relevant.
While you're standing, I'm going to eat a bag of chips because I feel like that balances the healthiness level of the
you got to keep it balanced. It's like a conservation of energy or something.
Cool. So I'm Perjan. I'm the designer and front-end developer on Hyperdev. My desk also stands up. I can't stand because I pulled my hamstring, but what makes my desk extra special is that I'm in New York.
Them special New York desks.
Yep, they're fancy and shiny.
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about Hyperdev. So I guess, Daniel, on a very high level, can you tell us what Hyperdev is?
Yeah, so imagine all of your wildest dreams, and they're in a room. Hyperdev is the door to that room.
You practice this.
It's all improv, straight off the top of my head.
Yeah. Full stop.
I want to go through the door.
Over.
I've opened the door, and now.
Yeah. So, but more like technically, okay, right? You got all your dreams, you want to achieve them. So you use Hyperdev. It's a website, basically. You go to a web page. It's an editor in the browser, and it lets you write JavaScript applications. And in the future, many more kinds of applications. But right now, it's all JavaScript, Node.js. As soon as you hit the web page, you have an app running on a server on the internet somewhere. You have a URL you can share with your friends. You can make changes directly in the browser, and those changes within a second are live on your app. So it's the fastest way to develop applications on the web.
Very cool.
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is something like Plunker or CodePen. So how is it different to those other similar kind of services?
Yeah, so a lot of the tools, like there's JS Fiddle, Plunker, CodePen, probably like I think Mozilla has Thimble. There's like 100 of them. Many of them are front end only. So if you can't really do server side code. You can't do like sort of full web apps and things like that. So Hyperdev is the main differentiator from those kind of code playgrounds. Is Hyperdev is a full stack environment.
Cool. So, all right. So far we've got that it also does the server side stuff. So it sounds like it is much more like as you said, it is full stack. It is a full stack way to build applications in the browser. So I also know that historically myself, and I'm sure others have been like fairly wary of like full like web-based IDEs. I don't even know if you would really call this an IDE, but why is Hyperdev different than a lot of other like failed attempts, and why is it better? Why does it work?
Perjan, I bet you have some ideas.
So I gotta answer the hard questions.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, you can tap out if it's too challenging.
All right, I'll riff, see how far I go. So how Hyperweb is different than other web-based IDEs. I think a big part of it is sort of our emphasis on performance. So not only performance from the standpoint of like the application, does it like launch really fast? Does it react really fast to your inputs? But this idea that as you type, you instantly or seemingly instantly within a second see the sort of results of your action. So I add a new route and I can immediately go to the route, or I add an image and it's just there. I think a lot of that difference is about fluidity. And I guess in many ways, like Hyperdev is an IDE in the sense that it integrates like the running and the building of your application. But We don't use the term IDE because a lot of us just have a lot of bad experience using like what's traditionally called IDEs, like Eclipse and Xcode have like, to be polite, like they're rough edges. I'd call them dumpster fires in some cases. But
you know, rough edges or dumpster fires.
Yeah, either or. Like
Either of those.
Choose the one that makes you feel more comfortable and makes you hate me less. But the idea is like with Hyperdev, like your code isn't magical. We're not using like, you're not making a solution or anything like that when you make a Hyperdev project. It's just regular code. You can export it to GitHub. You can download it to your hard drive and run it locally if you want. And you can integrate whatever third-party service you want. So it's very open, sort of webbish philosophy. So we're trying to take the best from both worlds and walk that line.
So do you find a lot of people using it so far? I mean, you know, this is a little bit of sort of an extension of the sort of initial concept of sort of, maybe we call them demos or code demos, sort of your code pens of the world. Very interesting sort of demos. I mean, do you see a lot of people building demos on the stack right now?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of different projects. I just checked, I think yesterday, and we have over kind of 12,000 people who have registered through GitHub to log in and manage their projects. So I think it's growing pretty rapidly. We've got a gallery with, I think, like around 100 apps, I think, and those are ones we selected. Maybe it's 50, but we like selected quite a few different tutorials, getting started things, ways to use Hyperdev to integrate with Slack, like if you want to make a Slack bot or make a React tutorial or a React template to get started. So we have all kinds of different ways. With just one click, you can be learning a new technology on the web and have it published immediately to share with anyone you want. So,
I guess, I was just gonna jump in. I guess another important key, a little point to make is that like, so while we have like 12,000 GitHub IDs that have been used to log in, you don't actually need to log in to use the application. Like you can just go to hyperdev.com, type some stuff, have a real web app. So I imagine like the real number of people like that have actually used the app is probably a lot higher. But
yeah.
like that's 12,000 people who've like cared enough to log in, which I think is kind of nice.
We try and delay the login so that you can at least get started and see what it's about before you have to commit to signing up or logging in or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I like writing all my code ephemeral. You know, that's the way I write code. It's there and then just, you know, it's gone. You know, that's how I keep myself employed most days.
Yeah. It'll still stick around even like for a few weeks, I think, maybe a month. You have a chance to, before we clean it up. But we try and remind people.
So why build it? Like where like what gap did you feel like the web sort of needed, or not so much the web even, but just developers in general? Because obviously there's a lot of systems out there today that sort of let you deploy code and do things. But I'm sure, as we all know on the call, that can be, you know, its own set of, you know, pitfalls and traps. So like, was there a particular thing that said, you know what, we have to build this now because I don't want to deal with that anymore? Like, what was the driving force behind finding it?
Let's see. I've always been experimenting with like web-based applications or ways to code things faster. Historically, in a past life, I once did like 90 games in 90 days. It was like 1 hour game jams for 90 days. And like, in order like to even do that, you have to have an environment where you can sit down, finish something, and have it be published live like within the hour. So in a traditional environment, like you sit down the first hour is like, okay, I got to update my dependencies. I got to set up my environment. And like, you're lucky if you can even get started within an hour, much less publish it to the internet. And
yeah,
I have
usually
this.
I have to wait for NPM to finish in that first hour. You know, it's usually the first go around.
Yeah, wait for Eclipse to boot within the first hour. And but like, so I just, if you want to kind of experiment a lot and like just dive into stuff, it's a real motivation killer when you just hit these stupid problems, just like every step of the way. It's like, okay, now I have to solve another thing. And some people say, oh, well, that's just programming, but I don't believe that. I think like we can do a lot better. And so this is our attempt at doing a lot better.
What's also really interesting to me is that like for people who are trying to learn coding, like if you go to like CodePen or Treehouse, I'm not CodePen, but Code Academy or Treehouse and stuff like that, and you say, hey, I want to learn programming, and they're like, okay, what kind of language do you want to learn? Okay, I want to learn JavaScript, and it's like, okay, here's how you do if loops, whatever. But if you want to actually take that knowledge and use it in the world, Like there's this huge stack of problems you now have to like go through and jump through before you can even write like a console log statement and see things on the web. So yeah, I think it's kind of, we have like a weird place where we are, I think, on the web, where our tools are really great, but they're like great in isolation and they're not really connected very well together.
I'm sure this also helps as well, just as the kind of the not just front end, but things have become more complicated, and so having something that makes it just that much easier, like you said, to jump in. And because I have I have fielded questions from people, like I just did some stuff on, I think specifically from Code Academy. It's like, okay, like I think I know what I want to do, but didn't know how to include a JavaScript file into their HTML document. It's like, so like some of those little things that get kind of skipped over in the way that a lot of time that stuff is presented. So you mentioned Node and the front end stuff. So obviously JavaScript. Are those the only things? So like, is Node the only current back end language that's supported? And does the front end support any like transpilers like TypeScript or Babel or anything like that currently? And are there if not, are there plans to add things like that down the road?
Yeah, so right now we support Node and anything that kind of exists in the Node ecosystem. So NPM modules, you can use CoffeeScript, TypeScript. I think someone even got Dart working with like a little bit of a hack. But so there's like ways you can kind of even hack in right now Python, but we're trying to make it official in the future so that we're gonna have official support for Python, PHP, Ruby, and things like that, and possibly a lot more. But we want to make sure that when we do support it, we like really support these languages and not say, yeah, you just do this weird hack and it kind of works, good luck. We want it to be like all these languages to be first-class citizens on the platform, much like Node is right now.
So you said TypeScript. Is that including for the front end? Like, is it supported out of the box where you just like switch a toggle, or do you have to do it yourself?
I think there's probably a gallery example app where someone set it up, and so you can use that as a starting point, and then it'll be kind of working. And so that's sort of been our philosophy with a lot of these, is rather than say, like, we actually at the very beginning we tried to bundle a bunch of things in and say, yeah, you have everything and it's all kind of working like magic, but that turns out to have a lot of different trade-offs as well, because it makes your, like, the simple app is all of a sudden a lot more complicated, because you could just drop in TypeScript and it would work. And then it makes the startup time a lot slower. So what we kind of have shifted towards is the default app is just very simple, basic Express app. But then in the gallery, we have examples of here's how you could use TypeScript, here's how you could use React, here's how you could use all kinds of different Node modules, and even for like very specific things. I think someone did a, what was that? It was like a MongoDB, parse. Someone did like a parse server like in Hyperdev. So if you have a MongoDB database, then you use this Hyperdev template, put in your like tokens for your database, and now you've got like a parse server that you can use for your apps. So I was like really impressed with that. Even though it's like actually pretty simple, you just use the parse node module and configure your database. But now with like 2 clicks and you put in your tokens, you've got like a parse server hosted. So it was really blew me away.
That's really cool. I think lots of examples are really important, getting people to use things and adopt things. It makes things so much easier. So you kind of talked about how this is going to make kind of building apps on the web a lot easier, but often when you make things easier, you kind of have less flexibility. Is this something you imagine people using to build production applications, or is it literally just for demos and learning and those kind of things?
I imagine a lot of people using it for production applications, if only because when you show the prototype to your boss, they say, okay, it's done, ship it. And then
on a higher level,
production apps.
Exactly. I mean, I think that explains a lot of production apps that I use every day, unfortunately, or for the best, because they're shipping and they're live and we can use them, which is great. But I think from the beginning, we've always kind of been inspired by like the Rails model. So when Rails was introduced, it was like, here's a thing to like make a blog post or make a blog site or a to-do list, something really simple. And it was sort of seen by the community as like a toy. Not for serious work, quote unquote, but like as the tool matures and as people become more comfortable with like the abstractions or DHH's philosophy, like it's not today in 2016, it's not like a crazy thing to like run your whole business off of a Rails app. So I think we want to get Hyperdev into a place like that, following a similar trajectory.
So with that sort of comes the notion of scale, I think. The scalability of any platform is sort of key as you start to build things that are going to be used on a sort of daily basis. I mean, behind the scenes, how it seems to me very scalable from a front end perspective. Like I can go in, spin things up, and burn. But I also, simplicity with it brings concerns too, right? Like if I'm going to store 60 gigs of data off on this thing, I don't know if I should do that. Not to mention, I don't know if you want me to do that. As it starts to grow and you start to see this uptick, like how do you deal with that problem? Like, is it one of those, is it an architectural challenge to sort of, continuously expand these things into sort of that production level scale that you need, as opposed to something that simply serves sort of a, maybe a minimum viable product as it were now?
Yeah, so we are definitely still in beta right now, but as we mature and sort of figure out what the free tier limits are, we would like to allow anyone to store 60 gigs on Hyperdev, just say, and this is how much it will cost you every month. And then sort of like that solves a lot of scaling issues if you just say, you pay for what you use. Like AWS, it's super cheap, and it's like pennies to store gigabytes, but it's pennies every month. And somehow, if it's not free, then all of a sudden you can scale a lot better. So we do plan to have some kind of like a demarcation of like, if you're using it for small apps that aren't too expensive, they don't cost us very much, then it's free and it's fine, and you can sort of grow your app to a point. And if you need to grow it further, then we'll have paid options available. We're still like working out the exact details of what makes sense to people, like what do people feel good paying for, what seems like a fair deal. And so in the next couple months, as we're coming closer to exiting beta, we'll have that resolved.
It seems to me to be a very developer focused sort of platform. So, if you look at sort of the stack of things, right, one of the things that, a lot of developers don't want to have to deal with is sort of that deployment step, because as we were sort of discussing a little bit earlier, deployments can be difficult, right? You have sysops and DevOps and a lot of ops. There's always ops at the end of something that helps me deploy somewhere to something that I really may not want to know how it's going to scale up. I may raise scalable code, but hey, you deal with the Docker containers or whatever else I'm shipping on. Is that who you're sort of aiming this at? Sure, you're going to anger my sysadmin, but at the end of the day, like it seems to be very developer focused, that ease of initial use.
Yeah, I'd say it even goes beyond kind of developer focused into people who might not even traditionally think of themselves as developers. So it's by lowering the barrier to entry. Like there's all kinds of people and all kinds of businesses who are like, I just need to solve this problem using the computer. I need to get the data from this web page. I need to do something with it and then post it to this other form. And like, if you have to like open a ticket and wait 2 weeks and figure out exactly how you're going to scale your app and what it's going to cost the business, like it's just you're never even going to do it because it takes too long to get started. But if you can just in 10 minutes hack together a quick solution in Hyperdev and say, okay, here it is, it's working. It takes like 2 seconds to run. And then you have some idea of like how much it costs and how much it scales. And then you can even make those decisions. Like you can't make those decisions, I mean, unless you've written the same thing 100 times, you can't make those decisions before you start.
Cool. So, okay. So one of the cool things about being on the kind of like a cloud platform, like you guys, so like everything, it's just a website. There's nothing to download, nothing to do whatever. You get to do some pretty interesting things. One of the things looking through the website that you guys have is like a, I don't know if you want to call it like specifically, I don't remember exactly what it's called on the site, like a collaboration mode or something like that, that allows you to invite other people to work on the same project. And then it's kind of like a pair programming scenario. How important do you think something like that is to a platform like Hyperdev? And what are some of the challenges of getting of getting things like that working and working well.
All right, Persian, you want to start
Yeah,
on this
I'll
one?
start with the first half of that, like how important I think collaboration is. I mean, maybe I'm biased because we built it already, but I would say like very. And I think part of that is because like it's kind of tied to a vision of like what does programming look like in the future. Right now, programming is like we have a task, one programmer per task or case or however your business runs, and like you go off, you do it in isolation, and you like push it to version control to Git or whatever, and then that's how things are sort of broken up. But if you need help, like, or if you're just working on like a hard problem, it's kind of awkward right now to do pair programming. Like you physically need to co-locate or do like a streaming thing. But with Hyperdev, being able to say, hey, I'm working on a discrete task, but if you want to join me, you can join me. It sort of just works like Google Docs. I think that sort of opens up the way we sort of think about work and the way we think about like the unit like of a task, if that makes sense. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the technical part of it?
Yeah, I can add in a few things on that. I think like even though on Hyperdev we have this collaborative feature, still 90% of the time you are going to be programming alone. But when you do invite someone in, like it should just work like magic, like they're on the same computer, like they're right with you. Because if that doesn't work, then it's like a huge barrier. And all of your growth kind of comes from sharing and shared experiences. So just by the nature of saying we want to have Hyperdev be a live environment where the code one-to-one reflects like in the editor is what is running, that kind of by default gives you a shared experience because everyone shares that same, the code in the editor is the code that's running. And so sort of the collaboration kind of falls out of that philosophy of there's one app, it's on the internet, its code is there, and anyone can just reach in and touch it, I guess, within your ACL lists or however that's defined.
But so with that, I also just want to clarify something real quick. So that also, so when you say one, like there's one app running, so like they're not like, so you don't have like multiple environments or anything like that. Like you have one, like you said, here's the code, that is exactly what's running. As I edit it, that's what gets updated.
Yeah, so right now we have sort of one app is one environment. We have plans for a very simple kind of branching feature where you can have one app with multiple environments and ways to merge them together. There's a little bit of nuance that goes into that, but it seems like using tools like Git and things like that behind the scenes that it is fundamentally solvable. So.
Okay. Because I feel like that will be like you talking about like as you're going, because Hyperdev is still in beta at the moment, but as you as it grows and the idea of maybe somebody does pick to do this for some sort of a production application, like I think things like that will make like I think those are even more like differentiating factors between other things like this that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of I can lay out our philosophy on this for the future, and then months later we'll see how close we actually come. But like the idea is we do want to provide branching, sort of a GitHub feature branch based workflow where someone can say, okay, here's the app, I'm going to add feature X, they make a little branch, and then within an hour or a day or however long, then they can merge it back in. And then as people are working on branches, you could just see what other people are working on, jump in, help them out, go back to the main version. And sort of like it's like taking everything we're doing already, like all the best practices in Git, but just making them kind of like visible and shared through the internet. So you can just jump in and say, hey, I need some help on this CSS. Do you want to hop in? And like have people hop in with that.
Yeah,
And then,
I think that's really cool. I think that is really, really cool. Kind of like that. You're talking about like if you imagine how useful Git is now, right now, what's the process, right? It is, okay, I need help with this. I push my branch up. Can you pull this down, run it on your computer and all this other stuff versus just go to this link. Here's exactly what I'm doing. Here's what it looks like when it's running. And to just be able to, that seems really, really cool. And that seems like a very, very powerful way of collaborating with other developers.
yeah, and I think definitely with like behind the scenes, we'll be using some kind of version control like Git. And ideally, if we do it correctly, when you do check out like the Git repo that is backing your Hyperdev app, It should like look like a normal Git repo and make sense and work with all your existing tools. Like we shouldn't be doing anything weird underneath, just like checkpointing at various times and feature branching and rebase and doing whatever we need to do to like make it look like if you were to do it yourself, it'd be like, yeah, that's how I would do it, and then it'd be compatible with all your tools.
Kind of like kind of like create React apps eject thing, right? It's kind of how I'm seeing that of like you start working in this environment, in this scenario, and then if you need to do something else, you just pop it out and go along your merry way.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, Leon.
Yeah, no, he's already answered my next question, which was going to be about the version control, and if you could check out the same project locally and then use your IDE that you love, because a lot of people might not want to spend a lot of their time in like a browser-based IDE. So it'd be really cool if you could check the same project out, do any stuff, hardcore stuff locally, and then still make use of the platform, the hosting facilities and the collaboration facilities as well. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something we would like to support. It's not in there yet. But ideally, that should work if we do it right.
There is a hack to get that working where you export your project to GitHub, pull it down on your own machine, type some stuff, and then import that project, from GitHub to Hyperdev. It's really not the ideal solution, but you can do it if you really want to right now. And that's just by virtue of us just saying we're going to be like as open and interoperable as we can.
On the web-based IDE, is that something you guys wrote yourself, or is it an open source project? Kind of what's the tech behind it?
We're using the Ace editor, which is the thing by Cloud9, which GitHub also uses. But we're finding we have to make a lot of modifications to it, and we want to in the future, especially for things like mobile support and whatnot.
Yeah, I've got a bit of experience trying to get these JavaScript IDEs working across all different mobile platforms, and my God, it is a nightmare. So yeah. We had to move away from Ace, unfortunately, for that reason.
We should talk. We might have the same problems. Just make it insert the cursor where you want it to. Nope.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good question, actually. So you're planning on kind of providing some kind of mobile support for this kind of platform. Mm-hmm. Do you kind of see a future where a lot of people will be doing a lot more dev on mobile devices like tablets with keyboards maybe, or even touch-based devices? Do you think it could move that way?
I definitely could see that, as the general trend in consumer electronics is sort of moving to tablets and stuff. I think computers will always be awesome and exist, but it's nice to have that flexibility, even if you just use a phone or you're on vacation, you have a tablet and stuff, just to be able to fix a bug in bed or something like that. That's just a cool thing, I think, to enable.
Cool.
I so don't want that. I'm just saying, as someone who on his honeymoon was sitting on an island at the bar on a laptop trying to resolve a bug, as my new wife looked at me going, "Is this it? Is this what I've got?" Next,
I would say for emergency use only. Yeah.
We did.
I'm begging you.
Please no. We had
advertise it.
We actually just had a developer here go on vacation, and on the first day, his phone conveniently fell into the pool.
Nice.
He swears it actually just it was a total accident, but I am skeptical, and at the same time think he's a genius.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there comes a future where Apple will release the iPhone 8 and it'll be waterproof, and then you'll have to accidentally hit it with a hammer. But one day,
it got caught on the hammer.
Yeah.
What do you got a hammer for? For phone repair, obviously. Yeah, I mean, how do you fix your phones?
So actually, talking about the editor and talking about some mobile stuff, brings up a lot of the actual design aspects and the UX aspects of something like Hyperdev, where it's very cool to be like, oh, it deploys your stuff. It has these awesome collaboration features. All that stuff is really, really cool. But in order for people to want to use it, the actual UX and design of the thing has to work. It actually just has to work. It has to work and it has to be intuitive. And especially if you're talking about having things optimized in any way for tablets and mobile. So can you guys speak to kind of the design philosophy and process behind Hyperdev?
Okay, I guess I could do that. So I guess the Hyperdev has like we started writing out like a bunch of principles, like what do we want to prioritize, in the UI. And I guess principle number one is like the UI should never distract you from being in the zone. Like it should encourage you to get into that code flow. But at the same time, like we want to provide like affordances, like say we have like a branching button or a branching feature. We want people to be able to discover that and find it. So there's this like balance and tightrope we're sort of constantly walking between having things easy to find and also having like it being like a nice place to write code in, because that's like job one at the end of the day. The other big consideration is that like from day one, we wanted it to just work in mobile, like be fully responsive and not be like a compromised sort of version where it was like you're going to mobile.hyperdev.com that has like half the features. So I think those sort of two big constraints sort of drives the design into the direction and the shape that's in right now. And just like we have this really great sort of development environment when we work on Hyperdev locally, where it's continuously integrated and all that. And we have like dev flags and stuff. So I can actually build features and live with them for a while, sometimes in the case of like months. And we go by feel, like over time, like, is this annoying to use? Is this not? Should we kill it? And we have like we're in a place where it's pretty easy for us to say, because it's a small team possibly, or just because, we're open to the idea that like killing features is totally cool, and killing UI and adding UI, just being pretty fluid about our sort of development approach. Do you have anything to add, Daniel?
Yeah, I guess I sort of agree with that. Like a lot of the time you can't really tell how something works until it is sort of prototyped or in the UI, or you've been using it for a week or two. And so our sort of approach on that is just get something in like as quick as possible and feel it out. And then when, like if it feels right, if it works well, then we keep it, refine it. And if it doesn't work, we try something else. It's a very experimental approach.
I've got a silly question. Can you enable a dark theme for the IDE?
There already is one. I built it a couple months ago. If you log in and then click your user profile picture, there'll be like a switch to night mode or something like that button.
Yeah, cool. It was our most requested.
Yep. We only recently added it.
Yeah, but until we added it, it was our #1 requested feature. It still is, I guess.
I mean, and I guess it's not. I guess it's not really, Leon. I guess it's not really that silly of a question, because I am thinking about it. Most IDEs that I can think of, at least off the top of my head right now, the default theme is some sort of a dark theme. I can't. I'm actually trying to think of one. Maybe Eclipse, that the default is a light theme.
I thought with
Eclipse
Xcode
doesn't.
Yeah, with Xcode you get a white theme. Yeah.
And WebStorm's default theme actually is white as well.
Is it?
Yeah, you have to. I installed it today. So you actually have to, on the install options, you actually have to enable like the Dracula theme. So by default, that's also. But who chooses the normal version?
Yeah, nobody.
I always found the Dracula theme name strange. Like, is it sucking the life out of you? Like, my editor's about to suck you dry.
At least it's honest about it,
Yeah.
It's up front.
So I had a question. I know I keep getting back to like exactly what the exactly what can be supported by the platform, like languages and stuff like that. Is there any technical reason that compiled languages wouldn't be able to be used, like backend languages like a Go or a Java or something like that? Or just based on the platform, is it restricted to dynamic languages like Node? And you said somebody even hacked a way to make Python work.
Yeah, I think like there's no technical reason why Java wouldn't work, but the sort of user experience reason, like if you're coming from JavaScript or Ruby or Python, where it's a dynamic language, there's 0 compile time, you make a change, and then you see the change in your open tab, your preview window. If that happens like quick enough, it's feels really great. But if in like say you're using Java, you make a change, it has to recompile like 20 classes and takes like 10 seconds or however long, then like that might feel really bad. But it might be fine. Like it might be 10 times faster than what people are used to anyway. So I'm not sure, but it just technically there's no limit. It's just in the user experience. Like if people are used to this rapid feedback, they'll like leave the web if it's too slow. If it like takes more than 2 seconds, they'll just say, I'll do it locally because it's faster.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like the whole like action reaction loop is like, it's not a thing that like works well in like a feature checklist, but I think it's like one of the most important parts of Hyperdev. Like, so when we first started building it, and the build process was a lot slower, we sort of noticed that there were these thresholds, and like if the change took more than 3 seconds for you to see the results of, like people just felt like, nah, this is okay, whatever. I'll probably just stick with my local editor. And then like around a second, like people started drastically changing at these levels. And around like 0.5 seconds to 2 seconds, it was sort of like, this is like the magical place. Yeah, so we've always tried to strive to keep it down. But I guess, yeah, like Daniel said, the context might be different for a Java developer where like your baseline or your expectation just might be lower.
Yeah, although if we do get Java and JavaScript, then we'll have 100% of all developers. So that'll be great.
Got them all.
Yeah, like Pokemon.
They're the same language, right?
Yeah, that's the popular one.
Subset of the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see anything different. So this might also be a silly question, but so how does so right now we've got Node, all that stuff's great. How do we handle things like environment variables and things like that would be running? Is there a way? Is there like just a built-in way where it's like just enter your environment variables here, or are there other things that you have to do, or is it just you have to do it manually on your own?
Yeah, so right now we've got a sort of .env file in the editor, and that file is private. So if someone else remixes your project, they don't get your database access. And you just put these like sort of key values, kind of like similar to the Foreman format of .env files. And then when your app starts up, it just loads those into your environment. So you can put like database credentials, keys to services you use, and they're secure. And then when your app runs, you have access to them using like process.env, and you get those. I think we also put in the port and a couple other things. But so if you follow that 12-factor app, it works like magic.
Cool. So you've mentioned databases a couple times, and so this is part of the disconnect for me, where I'm trying to reconcile what I know from like the web-based stuff like this. So when you're setting up a project, can you just install whatever database you want? Can you just install Mongo right away? Is there like, we support these databases that you can use? Does the database have to just sit somewhere else and you can point to it?
Yeah, so right now we don't have any, so Heroku has like components or plugins, whatever they call them. There's a bunch of tools on the internet also where you can get like database as a service. And usually those just give you a little environment variable. And so if you take that environment variable that you have from some other service and put that into Hyperdev, it works. We don't have any kind of built-in components yet. Maybe in the future we'll have like one-click, yeah, just give me a Postgres. But it seems like that's a solvable problem. We know we can add it if we want to, but since all the existing tools, like, we don't want to compete just yet until we're ready to kind of go all in on it.
There's also this thing.
Oh,
sorry. I was going to say really quickly. There's also this idea that like if we wanted to add like a database, we wanted to do it like the right way, and like doing it the right way is really hard. So like it's really easy to say, hey, we'll just work with like MongoLab or whatever off out of the box. You can totally use that for now. I do that for my projects.
Yeah. No, I think that I think that totally makes sense. It just got mentioned before, and I wanted to clarify whether it was something that was part of the Hyperdev platform or if it was separate. But no, I think that's a very responsible way to go about it too. Like, it sounds like that's kind of been the some of the core ideas behind it is like, if we do these things, we're gonna make sure we do them well, which I think a lot of people appreciate.
Yeah, and in the meantime, just using like the existing open interactions makes sure that when we do actually implement them, they'll still be compatible with the existing versions. We're not going to end up doing something weird that like only works in Hyperdev and make it like, oh, you have to learn this whole thing. We don't have a Postgres database, but we have a PostgreSQL database that is cooler because,
It's groovy.
yeah, it's almost compatible, but we won't tell you how it's different.
Well, and there is a fear of this. I mean, sort of ongoing. You know, when you look at things like that sort of existed in this space, parse. You know, now
Yep.
parse is gone, and then people, what do I do? How do I get things out? And then, you know, there are other ones out there that they have similar problems, which is people want to use them for the simplicity because there is that sort of curve, right? I want to do something. I want to build something faster, but not necessarily understand the inner workings of deploying that thing. So things like databases, I think, have become that sort of thing. And then, but the problem is that to get some additional simplicity, you give up some additional freedom, right?
Yeah.
And as developers, there can be a notion, well, okay, I'll make this simpler. That way I can build this thing. And then, now I don't want to do that anymore because that is bad and I can't get out. You know, as you start to, you know, look at the languages and features as you develop it out, I mean, what are the same things that you hear about most from people? Like, you know, we sort of talked about the dark theme, but I mean, are there like features that people are like, if this had this, I would be sold straight away? Is that databases? Is it languages? Is it tooling?
I think right now the main ones are probably branching and more languages are number one. I guess Persian, do you have any others we hear a lot?
No, those are the big two. And we're always trying to like get reliability higher and higher, get all those nines and such. Yeah, those are the big two.
Nines are hard. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think people fail to realize that.
We got eights covered, but
Yeah.
still
Got eights
striving
on
for
lock.
something like
On top of that, have you got any other like big plans for the future? Any other big major features you'd really like to get in that you haven't already talked about?
Yeah, we probably have like years worth of features, but if we bring them up now, like, you know, people will get their hopes up and be like, oh, it's going to take years to get.
Yeah, just the text editing component alone is like a project unto itself on the community side. Like, there's just so much we want to do.
And a lot of the features were like from the very first week or two, we kind of like planned out all the stuff we want. Like we're still barely, like we're maybe 20% into it. I think the collaborative editing was like the big one that's done because that one has a lot of impact on like the design of the system and how it works. Whereas the other things like say GitHub and version control and archiving and like integration with external things, like the branching is probably the next one that has like the second biggest impact of like how do we structure internally your project's data so that we can snapshot it, version it, import export with existing VCS tools. It's like that one has a little bit, it's like the next biggest kind of architectural impact. And so I guess we try and start with ones that would have like if we picked wrong and then had to add this, it'd be like a big problem. So we're trying to start with the ones that might have the biggest change on the overall structure of the system. But like the editor, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure everyone appreciate that as well, you know, making sure the thing's done right, it's reliable, and there's, you know, less changes in the future to the way things work.
Yeah, like the editor itself, like if we were basically to say, it would basically be re-implementing ACE, which took those guys like 10 years. And so like that could be a 10-year project, and we'd have, we'll have the best autocomplete and the best like jump to definition and the best like integrated snippets where you can be like trying to type something out and Clippy will pop up and be like, oh, it looks like you're trying to merge two lists. Here's a sample from Stack Overflow. You want to paste it in right now? And like, yeah, we could have all of that stuff, but that's like 10 years.
Know when you finish that, and I'll just clone it and use it in my own work.
And you like start typing, you start smashing the keyboard, and you're like, oh, it looks like you're trying to build a to-do list.
Wow.
Half of all developers would be out of work.
Well, I mean, you can get better at copying and pasting, you know, so there's always going to be a lot of like mysticism to it.
I have one more question slash feature request because the entire you can't tell from a lot of my questions, a lot of things that I'm trying to nail down is like as this thing goes on, like could this be a replacement for desktop editors for people? Like could I at some point do all of my work here? And yes. I think yes, it's just move on. We've answered that question. But one of my questions is about potentially like integrated like unit test support. So for example, like, is it for that to be maybe even part of the platform where it's like, okay, here we can run through all of our tests. Like, even if you guys prescribed, we're going to use Mocha for everything or something like that, and here's your formatted coverage report and things like that. Is that something that's on it? I'm sure that's probably much further down on the list if it is on the list. I'm just curious if it's on the list.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list. Right now, you can sort of fake it by on your NPM, like since it's basically NPM and node projects, you can have in your start script, if you say like NPM test and NPM run or whatever, then it will test, and like if your tests fail, it'll stop your thing from running. That's pretty hacky. In the future, we can just run the NPM test script automatically, like when your code changes, and present a view or a report, like a little console output. And then after that, the next step is then, okay, in multiple languages, what's like the standard technique for running test scripts in various languages, and just have that like automatically be running based on whatever sort of base project you pick, and getting that output into the console, into a view in the editor, having like live updating. It's like that one's actually one of the smaller, well, it's only like a month of work or whatever compared to some of these other things. But it was got to fit it in the right time slot.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like adding more like the more you guys talk about it, I can definitely see why it's important. And we've already mentioned it, making sure you've got some of this stuff like really, really nailed down before you start introducing other languages, because that just totally compounds a lot of these problems, just from the fact, like you said, like the best way to test language X is not the same as language Y, and maybe the entire workflow is different. So I can definitely see how those challenges can become even more challenging.
Yeah, it's like scoping and feature creep also. Like if we just say, oh yeah, testing's really important, and it is, but it's like figuring out when to do it. Like we know we can do testing eventually. Like it's not going to change the overall structure too much. It's like, okay, we just have to do the hard work of for all the languages we support, which testing like tool is the most popular. Make sure we get the top 3 and those all work. And we can sort of cheat because like on the shell, if you have just one command that runs the test and it has a status of 0, your tests succeed, and a status of anything else, they fail. And then we can show like a little light, and it can be red or green, you know. And that'll go like 90% of the way. But then the other 90% of the work is just all the edge cases, all the like, you know, oh, I want to use this other testing framework that doesn't respect the status codes, because who would respect status codes? And then,
it seems silly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Justin and Leon, do you guys have any last questions before we start wrapping up?
I don't know.
I have tons of questions, but they're really not relevant to this conversation at this point. I will ask. What did we miss? Like, what was the thing that we didn't ask that we should have asked that apparently we just didn't ask? Like, what is the thing that we should know that you probably want to tell us about this or other things?
It's a tough question. Yeah. I have to think about the entire universe.
I've got a quick question. Do you think you'll be able to get to the point where you'll be using Hyperdev to build Hyperdev?
Possibly.
We debated about doing that for a while back in the day. Yeah.
We're still going back and forth a bit. Yeah. There's some big trade-offs in that, and it gets pretty complicated.
Yeah.
I actually would prefer, like, it's challenging because like if you use it to build itself, then you can more quickly like solve like really hard problems about how it works, how the workflow should work, having it be quick enough, fast enough, usable enough. But then also there's like a bunch of other kind of stupid problems, because like, oh, if there's a problem in ACE or a problem in this component or a problem in something else, it just compounds. Like, so the same benefits that you get by using it, the compound, the negatives compound also. So it's just like a leverage multiplier, and some of the tools just aren't there yet. So it's
I think in the meantime we've written microservice, and little bits of it are separate Hyperdev apps that we rely on.
And it's a good compromise, I think, is take something that's not like completely core to the service, like maybe parts of the community site or parts of like some of our marketing pages.
Yeah, everything
They're like
marketing.
simpler standalone pieces and say, okay, these are in Hyperdev, and now we can have that experience of building them in Hyperdev. But if they like, it's not sort of like the Docker container management stuff where if it blows up, then the whole thing's destroyed. And
Awesome.
It's like the C compiler being written in C, like the ultimate form of dog fooding your own stuff.
yeah, and like some of the parts of it like are just not like, because we do a lot of sort of virtualization and containerization and Docker stuff, like you need to be a little closer to the hardware than you are when you're running your Node.js Express app. And so it's like there might be pieces of it, but it's hard to do kind of ahead of time, because if you don't know how the system fits together architecturally, then you kind of have to like work around any mistakes you made, and that slows you down. Like if only we could just step out of it, do it the right way, and then replace pieces. So it just gets but yeah, I think we have an okay compromise. There are some components are written in it, but not the whole thing.
Cool.
That would be a hell of an announcement if you could just say like all of a sudden right now all of Hyperdev is written in Hyperdev.
Yeah,
It is
just click the remix button, launch your own.
Get your own,
Hyperdev.
That's awesome. Justin, did you have anything you wanted to end on?
No, I think this has been a absolutely wonderful show. Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And so if anybody out there wanted to check out Hyperdev, if they had other questions, they wanted to get in touch with you guys, what would be the best way to do that?
Hyperdev.com, and you can hop in on the editor. There's also hyperdev.com/about, if the editor is a little too intense to just hop into. You can email me, danielx@fogcreek.com, and tell me your thoughts and feelings and dreams.
As for me, I'm a little more futuristic, so I have a Twitter account. Ooh, fancy. And you can find me at PKETH, so that's PKETH on Twitter. And I have a blog, which I rarely, but sometimes write things on at pketh.org.
Awesome. Well, as Justin said, thank you guys both very much. Hyperdev is a very cool project. It seems like it is taking like a kind of the next step in these, like web-based editors, IDs, whatever you want to call it. So again, so just thank you very much. And this has been episode 107 of the Web Platform Podcast, Hyperdev and Hyperdev in 12 parsecs. And we will see everybody next week.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. This is great.